I'd like to welcome everyone to our Earn Revenue in NFTs, DeFi, and Consensus Blockchain room. We are hosting these discussions every Wednesday, 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. And every other Wednesday, we have actual Zoom salons, virtual Infiom salons, where we invite four presenters who are either presenting about an innovation within the larger company, or are CEOs of a blockchain venture, and or are investors in the space. And today, I have Adrian here, who's going to introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about her background.
Hi, I'm Adrian Ashley, and I am a longtime blockchain founder. I've done several startups. I mostly work as an influencer, and for 3 years, I spent teaching due diligence and compliance to hedge funds who wanted to invest in blockchain. I have a startup on the blockchain, a naughty dating app for good girls that gets women laid by putting consent on the blockchain, because we need safety, security, and certainty to say yes, even to dinner. And right now, with the NFT craze, I've taken my longtime experience with NFTs in the green energy sector and translated them into building community for celebrities, influencers, and artists. That's me.
Thank you, Adrian. And my name is Mariana Danilovic. I've been on the venture capital side most of my career. Was part of a management team for the venture fund at Sony Pictures Entertainment right out of business school. Went on to run the first digital media incubator at KPMG. Many of the companies we launched there were digital media networks. Many of the founders are now the blockchain greats. Um, went into blockchain chasing liquidity in a space, starting with crowdfunding in 2015 and 16. And then some of the guys who I worked with in the first iteration of the development of digital media were running many different blockchain ventures. And they said, this is the space that's going to be sort of the next generation internet. And so have been working in the space since about 2016. Ran Bit Angels globally, the original angel network that invested in the launch of Ethereum. And now have been advising quite a few companies and run Infiom, which is a global consensus economy that helps develop the sector and speed up the growth. And I think we need Infiom today because of what's going on with the market. So, Adrian, what do you think? When will we get out of some of these readjustments in the market?
Well, I think that, it was bound to happen that we were going to have a correction because it got so high it really felt unstable. I think so. I'm not really worried too much about the correction. Now everything is on sale. Everyone who is looking at Bitcoin going to 63, and I mean, I think Ethereum even hit 43. That is, now it's more affordable, and I think now's the time to buy. What was really interesting was I would open my crypto.com, and literally everything was bloody, but I was still $2,100 up on $400. It was like, oh, okay, so it's really not as bad as it looks if you're somebody who's looking to hodl for the long term, right? If you're looking to do quick flips, which I don't like to do because of the tax implications. I don't like short-term capital gains. I don't like giving Uncle Sam any more than I have to. So I'm going to hold something for at least a year. And yeah, so I think it's just, it all depends on your perspective and your investment strategy. If you're a long-term investor, the world is on sale and you have the potential to make just gobs and gobs if you pick the right things. And you've got to do your own due diligence and research. And this is not financial advice. But I tend to invest by projects rather than by profit potential. But like things like Matic and Cardano and even Tezos, they're coming out with, or have already come out with, I think, Ethereum NFT killers, because the gas fees are just so volatile. And I had a $50 NFT and the gas was going to be $253. So of course it didn't sell. So when you're talking about being able to mint, even, like Sweet.io is a very consumer friendly NFT marketplace, and that's built on Bitcoin Cash. It only costs 5 cents to mint and like a fraction of a penny to transfer. So, there are other alternatives. And I think that now that those are starting to pop up and become popular, those other networks are going to really benefit, and their prices are reflecting that.
And interestingly enough, as we both have spent quite a bit of time with altcoins over the years, if you look at even CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap, about 90% of the companies that are listed, and there are quite a few listed. There's like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. Give a listing service of tokens that have already launched. These are not the new ones on Uniswap or PancakeSwap, etc. Those tokens actually, many of them want to have their own native chain. And of course, there won't be 9,000 native chains. But if they have enough adoption and they have enough applications launching on their chain, enough stakeholders in their economies, they have a shot. So, how are you reviewing these native chains and deciding that some of them are actually worth the investment or worth your time and energy, et cetera, versus not?
Well, I just investigated one yesterday that their marketing and their branding is lovely. It's very comprehensive. I felt like all of my questions were answered. And then I looked under the hood, and the tech hadn't been updated since 2018, back when they were doing something else. So I'm like, you're saying you're going to launch, but and that you're transparent with your code, but the code hasn't been updated in 3 years. Then I started looking at the corporation, which originally started in Kazakhstan, but clearly has not been there in 5 years because it doesn't show up on the government database. They only have one in Singapore, and there's litigation on three more. So it's it's a no for me. So you have to do your due diligence. It doesn't matter how sexy the sales pitch is. Uh, Before you invest in something, a significant amount. I mean, if you want to just go invest Vegas money, go for it, right? A pair of shoes, a movie, popcorn, and a drink, whatever. Even $500 or whatever's Vegas money to you, right? That's totally fine. But if you're going to invest a significant amount into something, you really need to do a total due diligence, and that includes a code review. There's a few things that I look at the very beginning. One, are they selling to U.S. citizens? If they are, first place I go is the SEC website and look up their filings. Because if they're going to sell to U.S. citizens and they haven't filed, that's a huge red flag. Tells me that they're not going to run this like an actual corporation. Then I will go look at where they say they're domiciled, and then I'll go look at their code. And if their code is not commented, that is going to be a nightmare at some point down the road. And I would say about 70% of the code reviews that I've done were not commented. And I passed on all those, and all of them have died. I didn't miss a unicorn.
Yeah, so it's kind of back to fundamentals. And with blockchain, I find you have to even have stronger fundamentals than even with startups in innovation before that, because at the end of the day, there are lots of interesting propositions that are anybody can just copy a white paper, right? But at the end of the day, the team has to be real. They have to have real experiences, and they have to be able to pivot inside a marketplace that's very, very challenging and changing every day. um, what would you say about the marketing strategies on some of these companies that have been around for a while? They all seem to do the same thing, and I know marketing is your expertise, but they all seem to be trying to attract developers. They all seem to have some foundation that puts some sum of money into developing an app, but we're not really sure how much. And then they have some technical support, but we're not really sure who the technical support are. How do you do due diligence on that?
Well, so that's a fun thing, right? So the reason that Ethereum is still on the top is because there are so many Solidity developers. So then you have other blockchains that are like, look, you can code in Solidity. I think they're hedging the developer shortage. Now that we have NFTs, not only are we dragging in blockchain developers, we're also dragging in artists, graphic designers, motion artists, musicians. We're literally stealing all of the creative talent on the planet, and then just wait till we start doing full-blown metaverse development, like on an extensive level. Developers are going to be very, very scarce. That's why EOS and Ethereum and Tezos and Cardano and a few others have free training. You can literally, for free, go on their website, register for their education classes. IBM is even starting to do this, and get certified as a developer on that platform, and go out and make $150,000 to $300,000 a year, like super easy. So I think what the entire industry needs to do as a whole is go out there and start getting these high schoolers and say, look, you don't want to work at McDonald's. I know they're offering a $1,500 sign up bonus, but that's chump change. So do this instead. And I had brought my friend's son with me to an EOS meetup, and they were all over him. I mean, it was like he might as well have been honey, because everybody was all over him. And they were like, look, all you have to do is this, and then you can earn $300,000 a year. He was 14 at the time. But it's just, we need more developers. So then when you look at a project, you have to look at what is the caliber of that developer. If they've got a rock star with like multiple exited projects under them that are great, that's that's diamond bonus points. Most of the time you're not going to recognize any of the developers, and even if you look them up and see what they've done, it's probably nothing too significant because there's just not that many.
Yeah, the developers always seem to be the most desired component of every management team. Do you believe some of these teams that have been around for, since 2014, 15, and the company maybe had an ICO, it was successful or somewhat successful, and then they couldn't raise any money during the crypto winter? Do you feel like some of these development teams are going to be sort of up for grabs very soon?
Oh, yes. I'm actually wooing three of them for three different projects. Um, and they've got talent. They already have a cohesive team. Their culture's good. Their productivity is good. Their work product is excellent. And I was trying to get them before they realized that they were such a hot commodity, they could like name their price that would literally make me gasp.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I find so many projects lately, as I start looking down, the list of tokens that have launched, these are not really startups. They've launched a token at some point. It may or may not be trading somewhere. People may or may not have it at this point, but usually there's some portion of the token that's been dispersed. So they have some users. The platform is usually built out, whatever they're trying to do, whether it's a native chain or some other function. And then I would say they kind of hit the wall. One, because of the crypto winter. Two, it's a really, really tough competition out there with, daily Cardano announcements and daily Ethereum announcements. To get above that noise right now is super hard. And so they are great people. They have great assets, but it's not moving. Tokens not moving in the right direction. Do you feel there will be some sort of I would say, ways to integrate these teams?
I think I think developers have a favorite thing, and rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and have them learn a whole new language, I would always place them where their skill set is strongest.
Yeah, but I think they may merge with some of these business teams to create a bigger venture. That's all I'm thinking.
Oh, they could.
Yeah. Hi,
Yeah.
Christian. Christian, you
Hello.
want to give your background a little bit for their audience?
Yeah, for anybody who hasn't heard that yet, we see in the blockchain space. Our original venture fund 20 years ago was focused on multi-massive online player games and voice of IP solutions. So it shares a lot in common with the topic that we've been focused on for the last 5, 6 years, which is the blockchain space, albeit we call it a little more nuanced decentralized software solution because that includes also graphs, and overall we see it as a subset of the Web3 stack that's being built. Personally, I'm a lawyer by training and was a software developer before that. I write a lot, I speak a lot. I'm part of the curriculum design for a couple of universities, Harvard and the Frankfurt School of Finance and the Nova School in Lisbon. And I'm also on board of a couple of organizations that set standards for data exchange. They're specifically Open Travel and the Open Identity Foundation for their finance group. Anyway, too much about me.
Oh, that's
You're one
great.
of my most fascinating people. I love it when I'm on stage with you, though.
We love this combo.
Well, thank you.
Lots of brain power. Um, so, Christian, you're looking at the market probably a little differently than myself. And what are you thinking about these tokens, having a very tough time in this last week or so?
Well, I mean, we have three different things going on here. So my main time is spent on the venture fund, and they are strictly technology investing. So the price doesn't really concern me all that much. As far as our hedge fund is concerned, it's a separate team that my partner Carl oversees. Any movement is good movement from our perspective. So again, it doesn't really matter. On the other end, we also have a Skunkworks team building a non-custodial wallet solution. And again, their movement is always a friend of these solutions. And at the end of the day, that was kind of to be expected as far as our team here is concerned, that we would see a correction, a sharp correction specifically.
Yeah, and there's also, I would say, lots of building on the technology side that's being announced with some of these projects. And Adrian and I were just talking about the fact that you have to do your due diligence on each project and realize how much of the technology is actually real, and how much of the business has actually been implemented. What do you look at if you're looking at one of these projects? How are you doing your due diligence on the technology side?
Oh, that's like an hour-long talk, but I'll summarize it for you. We are principal investor in the sense of we're looking at the technology first, and we're using the scientific method to investing, which means that we actually formulate our own thesis, then run it against a team that is doing an experiment in that space. So that's essentially your startup, and then they get to compare their thesis with ours, and either we adjust our thesis to theirs, or more often than not, they adjust their thesis to ours. And so we are very discretionary in our allocation. So we only made 9 allocations after looking at close to 700 projects. And one of our largest allocations today finally made their token available for sale. This is not investment advice, but everybody should look at this, which is the hash token on the Provenance chain. Provenance, for people that don't know this, is a chain that facilitates loan origination. The original implementation was built directly by the team. It's called Figure. It's a HELOC implementation. They wrote the largest loan since the financial crisis in 2008, last year, for more than $300 million. And the CEO over there was the previous founder and CEO of SoFi. So a very well experienced team. But as far as our due diligence process, the reason why we are so very scrutinizing is we take a long-term horizon. So we call our fund Sustaining. It's a play on sustainability that we look at on a variety of different levels. It's the technology long-term viable, and then B is there a viable business model to be had, and a business model there specifically within our space that aligns the interest of the shareholders. Because in my opinion, extracting models long term will no longer be viable. We actually seek those out to take them out of business. So your typical scenario would be an Uber, right? So Uber long term we don't see in that current constellation as a viable business, because we can already see decentralized Uber solutions emerging. There's one in Quebec where they literally took Uber out, as in the local government decided, well, you Uber will no longer have a license here because that should really be a co-op model. But yeah, so as far as typical due diligence process, I wrote an article about this some time ago that you guys can find on Forbes, and then longer version on Hacker Noon, because it's somewhat specific to what we do. I mean, we're narrowly focused on decentralized software solution, Web3 stack, and we have certain ideas on how these can be implemented. Anyway, as I said, I don't want to bore you to death with our due diligence process here. I think the most useful thing is just find that article, just put in my last name, KAMEIR, plus raise money from blockchain VC or something. You'll probably find it pretty quick.
Well, definitely read good reading material. In terms of the, what I love about your strategy, with investments, Christian, is that you create a coordinate system and you create a theory that works within that coordinate system, and you compare that to what the team has developed. Not many VCs over the years that I worked with and been inside, VC arms of companies, etc. No one really does that. And I feel that that is like one of the best ways to evaluate whether you should make an investment.
Well, in my opinion, it's really the only way, right? If you're just sitting at your office and waiting for people to pitch you, get a very lens of the view. I just got off a different phone call that was giving a talk. It's kind of bringing a gun to a sword fight in a way, because if you don't have a thesis and you don't sharpen your thesis on a daily basis, you're kind of stuck, and that's what we're seeing with a lot of allocators. But obviously we also see that way more of the startups in the field, which is really, really tragic, because from my perspective, and the reason why I'm in the space is because I actually want to see the World Wide Web, as I mentioned many times, develop for the first time, right? And that's something I've been excited about, that idea and principle, for more than a decade. And so now that we are at this pivotal point where we actually have the primitives to do so, I just hate to see people waste their time on creating architectures that are simply not valid. And unfortunately, there's a lot of allocators throwing money at things that we already disproved years ago at this point in time, that they just never got to see, or they don't understand how this technology is supposed to be implemented. And unfortunately, reality doesn't have any advertising budget. That's one of my typical lines there. And that's why you want to use the scientific method, right? And you want to collect as much data as possible. So we have 4 people on our, how do we have 5? I think we have 5 people now on our data science team, and that's most of what they do, right? They just provide us with the necessary data. We do our own skunkworks development, and within our space, it's very hard to make intelligent decisions otherwise. We really have to get your hands dirty in that sense. Anyway.
So going from like a really strategic discussion on how to evaluate, one, whether you should start a business in blockchain, two, what is the potential upside of this business using a blockchain consensus economy, or launching NFTs as part of your business and as your business strategy, having a DeFi type company, whether it applies to your space. I think there are layers and layers of analysis that one should go through, and not just hear that DeFi is hot and NFTs are hot and let's just throw them into this business, which I'm seeing, as you guys probably have, like daily.
Yeah, I mean, there's many things to say about that, but in simple ways, the opportunities at the moment are endless. And at scale, you should simply look at this in terms of who's still using database solutions to do something today. Because in my personal opinion, account-based solutions will go away within the next decade. And they are particularly because you cannot reliably store data in databases. All databases are honeypots, specifically if and where they have any type of asset data, or worse, when that's always connected, have personal identifiable data. My expectation is that more advanced nations on that topic, specifically in Europe, will actually outlaw the usage of database solutions for storage of PII, because you can't protect them. But at the same point in time, and these are the low-hanging fruit, there's all these things in the real physical world that we need to onboard to decentralized software solutions. So these need to have cryptographic primitive clones, and that's the term that I use. And people keep referring to NFTs, and they usually look for jumping jiffies or something else. The real world application in economic activity is mostly that of having a digital clone for real world physical items. And we made a bunch of examples years ago about that are actually not that hard to implement, right? And it starts with very simple things like every piece of paper that you ever encounter, i.e., my typical example is always your dry cleaning receipt. At this point in time, should be an NFT, something that swipes over into your digital wallet, that you have custody over, and that has the metadata for all the things that happened with or to this particular item that exists in the real world. And then I wrote a thesis paper for a car manufacturer some time ago, where if and when they implement this, things like recalling entire production lines of one car won't happen anymore, because at that point in time you can actually identify the particular roll of sheet metal which produce then 50 faulty cars or 50 faulty car doors, and that's the only batch that you're recalling, and everybody else keeps their car in the garage. And just this particular example, by the way, that is the tens of billions of dollars in damages a year to that particular industry. And overall, in the whole supply chain space, more than 50% of the data within that space is inaccurate, because they just live in data silos. They're being duplicated, they're being slightly changed, they're being lost, the items are lost anyway. So larger point there being is, whenever you see these things, i.e. receipt, i.e. bill of lading, etc., think of just building a very simple app. And the larger point there is, look for the existing data standards within these systems. Look for data standards within ERPs, within POS systems, and so forth, and build simple apps that just create NFTs that have a lot of utility by simply attaching this metadata along the supply chain in the virtual world. That's the practical implementation. And obviously, there's a lot of like playing around in virtual worlds, and that's also interesting. But the real world economic activity is several orders of magnitude greater, and it's actually, funny enough, pretty easy to do at this point in time if you know the primitives that are available. And I just mentioned one of our portfolio companies, which is Mint-based, which is switched to NIA because of the creation cost of NFTs. You can take those primitives and start coding. Right? It's not that hard, or it's not that hard to find people that can help with that. And the opportunities right now are absolutely endless, because any app that you're seeing on your phone at the moment needs to eventually be replaced with a DApp, right? With a decentralized application that accesses data only in a way that it actually doesn't have custody over personal identifiable data. And specifically those apps that still do that, we will actively seek out and destroy at the end of the day, because they shouldn't exist. And that's the reason why there's 4,000 or 5,000 databases that all of you guys' data is sitting in, that are being washed from left to right, and you're being targeted from left to right. So that's a larger problem. Anyway, I'm going to stop myself here, and I think I have to jump on another call in about 2 minutes here.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that you're saying this, because back in, I would say 2015, I was presenting at a big data conference, and my topic was blockchain, and everybody else's topic was big data. And my takeaway was that all the data scientists that were, just graduating from UCLA, USC, and a bunch of other kids were there as well. They were all getting ready to, kind of swim in these large ponds of data that, as you pointed out, would be talking to each other in mysterious ways. And then hopefully, as you input the data in, the quality of that data out would actually be meaningful after this major analysis chain. And what you're saying is that many of those swimming pools will actually be replaced with decentralized, applications, which is awesome.
Yeah, they have to. I mean, at the end of the day, and you see all these newer laws emerging, whoever is the actual rightful owner should have complete and utter control. You shouldn't have to opt out of anything. Actually, this metaphor I keep using for that is, you probably all know this do not call list. This should exist for anything that pertains to your person. Any data that you generate should by default be on a do not call list. Just like you don't get to have it unless you have my express permission. Otherwise, if you're using it, you're actually abusing it, and I need to be get paid or compensated, or you need to be punished because of doing so. And we have these examples already. And at the end of the day, I think one of the agencies will make an example out of either a tech entrepreneur or maybe even one of the larger tech companies. It has been brewing for some time.
It's
But
so
yeah,
interesting that I would say with data, um, you actually don't even know as a consumer or even as a business how to go about finding who owns your data at this point, because you've given this data away to these quote unquote safe databases so over so many years. How, yeah, how to deal with that?
Yeah, I outlined a bunch of solutions for that. Some of them will focus on very specific things, like a local startup. Here, what they are doing is they are specifically mining and aggregating those data brokerage for very specific data. There's like a subset of the US population at some point in time accumulated an arrest record, and then this was dismissed, but this arrest is still on their file. As a consequence, they will never get a call back from any employer when they employ, because this data still exists, even though it shouldn't exist, and it exists in about 4,000 databases. So the point here being is this is an ideal application for any law firm for lead generation, because you will go after these particular violators. Right? They should have deleted the data, they didn't, and there's actual damages in the real world that occur because of that. The larger point, though, is we need to create these evidence tools. We need to fight fire with fire, so that at the end of the day, that we actually penalize the real use of the data, which is usually social engineering as a service, because it's not about selling the data, it's about using the data, so that these data providers know more about you than you know about yourself, and they can essentially social engineer you into a certain type of behavior that is likely not a choice of your own at that point in time. And these kind of forensic tools, think about a simple Google plugin that basically just follows your click trail. Why and when did you do certain things? And even in my opinion, actually, even if it's just wasting your time, right? That should not be possible, because at the end of the day, what you're looking at in terms of the World Wide Web, it's a commons. No one owns it. It's actually supposed to be a tool that makes humanity in and of itself better by connecting all the brains that work on this. But we unfortunately let it deteriorate in this digital landfill, where only the parasites living on top of that get to feast. Anyway, that was another good big piece of mind, and I'm 2 minutes late to another call, but
Thank you,
yeah.
Christian. As always, this was very insightful.
All right, I'll
Have
let you
a,
guys go.
see you soon. So we're going to
Talk to you
also,
soon. Take care, guys.
right, we're going to address today these, I would say, NFT developments. California students turn Trump tweets into art, then sell them as NFTs to support Black Lives Matter and other types of nonprofit opportunities. I think with what Christian was talking about regarding the NFTs is the way that I view NFTs. There is art and creation like video, music, film, television, artistic projects that can be minted, sold as NFTs. Trump tweets, as kind of a joke NFT. Um, but there's a real application of NFTs where you can actually track not just a digital file, not just a film file, a television file, a music file, but you can actually track um, real world products, like the tuna that was farmed in freshwater and then brought to your table. You can actually track that tuna from inception to the table. The consumers can, the companies that process tuna can, and decide whether this really makes sense as something that you want to consume that day. So we believe that more and more products will actually have their own NFTs attached to them, which are really just data files that are authentic, that are on a decentralized network, and therefore validated by validators of the network, and true to what the meaning of the data, the underlying data is to the physical object. So as you start to build companies or think about building companies in the DeFi, NFTs, and consensus economy spaces, you should really think through some of these concepts that we discuss here every Wednesday, which is what are the real world problems that could be solved by decentralized applications of data. and how can I apply those to what I'm trying to do, to what I'm trying to solve. And I can open this up for any questions if you'd like to, if you'd like us to answer any of the current news and the thoughts and or projects that you may be working on. So let me know if you haven't, just raise a hand if you have any questions as we go through this. Additionally, I'd like to address, every star in Hollywood and every star on the planet minting NFTs. Um, I feel that this is going to continue. The reason for this minting of NFTs from talent is that talent in Hollywood, unless they have a very, very strong brand, has had a difficult time benefiting from their talent, from their brand. And the revenue models in Hollywood today are mostly focused on production of the product and distribution of the product. And there are quite a few middlemen involved, even through streaming services. So before the streaming services sort of took over in film, television, and music, the business models were big studios, whether it's music or film or television, would help finance the project. They would attach people to projects. So talent would be attached to a film, they would be attached to a TV project, they would be attached to a music production and or music interpretation. And they were in essence getting some equity ownership in that process, but not a lot. Most of the equity was owned by the studios producing and then by the distributors distributing. As streaming services came about, and I was part of this innovation cycle over the last 2 decades, we were hoping as we were innovating that all of a sudden creators will have access to that power, that they would be able to directly interface with the consumers, create their product, sell their product, and have an audience that creates around their product. Well, that didn't quite happen. As a matter of fact, I would say it went in the unfortunate direction for the creators, for the producers, for the talent, because the talent was less and less in charge of their product as these new systems developed. An example: Netflix. Before Netflix was distributing a television project or a film project, the studios would consider giving some equity points to top tier talent. So if you're an A-list actor, A-list producer, A-list director, you were conceivably hoping to get 1 point or some piece of equity of that film or of that television project. So you would get paid whatever your fee was, plus, hopefully, if the project does really, really well, you may get a piece of that upside. When streamers came about, it became very, very formulaic. They had to, develop a lot of content very quickly. And so the creators would get a small percentage. They would get some sort of almost like a salary, but no percentage of the revenue they create. And this even got worse because, on Netflix and Amazon, no one can really get the numbers. You don't really know how your television show or your film is actually performing as compared to all these other products. So it is very challenging to have numbers that would say, well, this particular talent, this actor, actress, producer, director should be getting some piece of equity in this project that was distributed by Netflix or by Amazon, because we know that the viewers, it was in the top 10 and 30% of the viewership watched that program, this past month. It's very, very hard to get those numbers. There's not much quantification around it. And so the talent is kind of left out of the equation. So with decentralized projects that we're working on, we're hoping to see that change. We're actually hoping to see that the talent could use these decentralized platforms, engage audiences directly, and allow those audiences to then basically pay that talent um, based on the value they place on the talent. So that's one of the things that I think the minting of NFTs is allowing the talent to do. One, it's allowing them to have a PR value of the process. So, people are talking about Snoop Dogg doing this with crypto.com. And, people are talking about all of the influencers here in the clubhouse that are actually minting their own NFTs. So it has PR value. It allows their fans to have a better relationship with them. So the fans are now more invested in the process, because not only that they can buy an album or stream a song or stream a television series, but they can also own a piece of art in that in that art that was created by their favorite talent. And finally, it allows talent to have additional revenue. So they're no longer just sort of, talent for hire or an employee of a streaming company, but they're actually able to have additional revenue that's really based on their brand, value, the strength of their brand. So the NFTs, as you think of them, in all of the creative ventures, they really are allowing three things for talent. One, more revenue, of course. Two, better relationship with their audience and strengthening of that relationship. And three, ability to expand their creativity and their talent beyond the business models that exist in Hollywood today. And you can see how some of the influencers are actually saying, I'm going to mint this NFT of my likeness doing X, Y, and Z. And then I want to use that to produce my next film or my next passion project. So they're also using the value extracted from the sale of NFTs to then launch their ability to produce, which is sort of, I would say, a promotion in the creative space, where one becomes in charge of their own projects. So the NFTs are going to be continue to be minted. um, they will evolve over time, so they're more elaborate creations and collaborations. And I feel that global interest in NFTs will continue as the formats start to change over time. um, with the Super World, which was one of the companies I've been advising for a couple of years, the NFTs have really kind of gone to the next level. So beyond the basics that I'm just describing, which is okay, let's create an NFT of a top tier musician or a top tier actor, actress, producer, director, project, etc. They're going to things like digital jewelry creation and connection of that jewelry to the real physical goods. So they're going into e-commerce space and creating NFTs of the actual e-commerce projects. So to me, that's another area that will develop, just like Christian was saying, that every product on earth should have its own NFT so that we can track it easily and find it easily and replace it, etc. With jewelry, with luxury goods, with golf clubs is a project I've seen. You can easily recognize this is it. This should be minted into an NFT. We want to know who owned this. We want to know who resold this and why. So I see that the e-commerce applications that I'm seeing on Superworld, where the physical goods that are being sold, and either through an online retailer or in-person retailer, are being connected to an NFTs and then digital assets also according to those physical objects being connected to NFTs. I see that happening, in the near future. An example was a golf club company that we saw a couple of weeks ago that was trying to create a secondary marketplace for golf clubs. They sell golf clubs in person and they sell them online. And you can see that if I owned a golf club, it may not be that exciting for a consumer that buys my golf club. But if Tiger Woods owned one or Shaquille O'Neal owned one, that the NFT attached to that golf club would be very interesting to someone who buys a secondhand golf club with that sort of additional value of ownership attached to it on the secondary market. Um, that's just a very basic example. We had a jewelry company presenting here last week that is on Superworld, and that particular jewelry company is connecting their jewelry they're selling in, top tier jewelry stores around the globe with digital jewelry that you can find on Superworld, and they're minting NFTs for both. You can see how that would be an interesting discussion topic, wearing a piece of jewelry that also has a digital, kind of partner that's also, and being NFT'd in Superworld, for example. We're also seeing in Superworld things like architectural plans and drawings being NFT'd because they're very unique and people want access to them over time. So this will expand to many other industries that are not necessarily Hollywood based. So many design and graphically driven industries. But then if you look at what Christian was saying, it literally goes to every consumer product, every car part, um, every piece of paper, every bottle of water produced. Almost everything can be NFT'd, and it would be a better way of managing that data. So we're seeing. I believe that NFTing is just at the very, very beginning of the process. So if you're thinking of starting a company, don't think about just an NFT marketplace. Don't think about just minting a few NFTs to add some additional revenue to the work that you're doing in any of the design and creative industries, but think about what products out there in this world are challenging to find, are going to be sold at maybe an upside value if they were owned by someone related to that product or famous. How would ownership by one of the Lakers enhance a basketball's value, or enhance a jersey's value, which we already know kind of exists as a collectible? How would enhance value of some other product, like a golf club? Would it matter whether one of the Lakers actually owned the golf club? And I would venture to say it really matters to a lot of people who are sports fans. um, we worked on a project that was called Fanchain a couple years ago, where basically the company was issuing Fanchain token that was being used globally to to power sports. So one of the deals we had was with stats.com, which is the largest statistical um, number provider for every game. So if you're watching a football game in the US here, or soccer in Europe, or you're watching a basketball game, you want to know what the stats are. Who's going to be shooting more 3-point shots this game, or did Rajon Rondo do more steals, or some other player on the opposite team. And they keep these stats. They track them and they keep them. And they have these large databases, and they resell them to all the broadcasters and broadband providers as they're streaming the games. So stats.com cut a deal with us to use Fanchain to sell data for the highlights of the games to all of the different broadcasters. So that was a large company that was actually using the token and powering up this economy. And then Fanchain was also being used in powering the buying of products and services in bars and restaurants as people were watching sports games. So there was a company in Seattle called FanWide, and we cut a deal with them. They organized events in bars where people who are, went to school back east, but are, let's say, in Seattle, would watch their, New York Yankees or some other, sport team they loved. They would get together and watch it in a bar or restaurant, and that bar or restaurant would allow them to pay with Fanchain. So you can see how I would say there are many, many applications of traditional tokens as well as NFTs that are not being applied to consumer industries yet, that we will see applied in the near future. The databases that are going to be built are going to be decentralized. The tokens will have true utility value, or the tokens used as currency and the tokens used as NFTs and as non-fungible unique tokens. So as you start to build these businesses that are built on consensus economies with NFTs and DeFi, I think having that understanding of why we're using these tools, how are they going to change our world, would be, the best way to think about a venture. And I'm going to have you, Michael, ask your question. Come on up. Hey, Michael.
Hi, Mariana. Thanks for having me. It was very interesting what you mentioned about the NFTs that are linked to sort of physical objects, and some of them will be memorabilia or some artifacts that by proving their provenance, they become much more valuable. And my question is, have you guys thought about how you're gonna prove that this is the actual physical object that was owned by Shaquille O'Neal or Tiger Woods?
Yeah, so it would have its own NFT attached to it.
I
So,
understand,
yeah.
but let's say it's a golf club. So how do I know that this NFT is linked to this particular golf club?
Yeah, you're saying, what if somebody just replaces that golf club and gives it a fake object?
Yes.
And I would venture to guess that, unless you're dealing with your super luxury automobile that you're dealing with, that most of the value is in the NFT, in the data around the object versus the object, right? So, um, but in order to secure the value of the object, we work with this company called Monex that also attaches a legal contract to the blockchain that allows you to add additional description and points and validation of the object. So let's say you're dealing with a very, very expensive Louis Vuitton purse, right? And there's just so many fakes out there, and people can actually fake a stamp and fake all sorts of things, but
Mm-hmm.
it would be very hard to fake the NFT that goes with it, right?
Well, of course, I don't have any doubt, but
Yeah.
how you prevent the counterfeiting of the physical object? I mean, do you have a solution for that?
Yeah, so I would say that there's one NFT per object, right? So if you decide to counterfeit it and create 50 of them, they cannot be attached to the same NFT on the chain, right? So that's one way.
Okay.
The second thing is that you can actually integrate data and information about objects on objects, with a variety of formats, variety of codes that can be integrated in the object. But there will always be counterfeiting of a physical good, right? But what good is it to someone who steals a, a picture right now that doesn't have that NFT attached to it, even though that may be the original painting?
Gotcha. So we are implying that the majority of the value will be accumulated inside the NFT itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like the stamp, that's that stamp that you can replicate on a purse that cannot be replicated anymore because it's on the blockchain.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a good question because, in dealing with super luxury automobiles and super luxury goods, you can see how that would come up over and over again.
Yes. Well, I have a limited experience with NFTs because my wife is an abstract painter, and I talked her into tokenizing one collection of her art and creating NFTs for that. And what she decided was to, if anybody buys the NFT, then she would sell the original painting as well, so the collector can have both, right? And the
Yeah,
implication is that it's going to be more valuable for them to keep them together than to separate them.
yeah, and I agree with you and with her. I think that's the right approach. She could also do, like, what serigraphs were, kind of have 40 or 50, in a series that are, and then maybe sell the original one with the separate NFT at a higher price. She can do that with her work. But for an artist like herself, I think just having this access to a global marketplace and being able to create these NFTs that are not just sold in a local gallery, but can be sold anywhere in the world, I think that in itself is kind of a new opportunity for revenue generating.
No, definitely. Yes.
And I see that, another thing that's happening with NFTs is that they're powering some of these economies globally. That, when we first started working with blockchain companies, we were so excited that we have the actual payment platforms in, a variety of African countries. I worked with Crowdforce in Nigeria. They were able to create these apps attached to that worked with POS systems at local mom and pop grocery stores. And in Nigeria, there was no integrated banking system where one can actually go and pay their solar system that's powering their energy for the house, pay in installments. They had to actually pay it all or nothing, kind of a thing. And so with that app, Crowdforce was able to create an installment based payment plans in all of these rural communities in Nigeria that really didn't have a banking system and payment system before. And I thought, gosh, this is the most amazing thing. We are really kind of changing the world, one blockchain application at a time, banking everyone, and etc. But I believe that the bigger opportunity that's come from blockchain and from these NFTs is that we now are allowing populations around the world to actually use their creativity to create things that people will buy and allow them to support their families and their lifestyle by creating, versus having to have 3, 4, 5 other jobs to support their creativity.
No, I
So
completely agree. I think it's a very interesting point that I think in terms of the economics of this whole industry, it's not going to be a power law distribution, right? So it's not going to be like the 1% of the 1% make all the money, and there is a whole bunch of other creative people that have to have 3 other jobs to support themselves, right? This can be exactly the model where if you have 1,000 people that actually believe in you and want to support what you're creating, here is the business model for this to make it happen.
absolutely. I feel that the artists can find their supportive community anywhere that it is in the world. And that is enough. They don't need to find 1,000 people that support their art or can see value in their art that all live in the same city or in the same area, geographic area, or even the same country. They could just distribute their art to everyone globally who sees value and beauty in what they're creating. um, and what's interesting about the NFT space, I read this article where I think it was in Philippines. There was a game on blockchain that allows people to purchase NFTs inside the game. And some people figured out how to sort of trade in these assets and were able to quit their jobs and just kind of support themselves inside, this blockchain game. It's not like my favorite business model, but I feel that, even having a platform where someone can create value for themselves and their families inside a game or inside a creative project of any kind, I feel that's a great opportunity, and that's sort of the promise of the blockchain.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would like to thank everyone. We try to keep these just to an hour so that you can, it's like a power lunch every Wednesday from 1:30 to 2:30. Invite your friends and bring some questions. And we would like to make them a little more interactive next time. So please bring some addition. Michael's always great with questions, but bring additional questions that you want answered about the space, how to launch a venture, how to earn revenue, how to take your projects and create some additional value from them in blockchain space. We would be happy to talk about it and figure out the ways to do that together. So thanks again. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See you next week. Bye.
Yes. Bye bye.
Bye.